Welcome, dear listener, to a tranquil space where curiosity finds its gentle rhythm, and the profound inquiries of our universe can unfold without haste. Tonight, a thought, perhaps a little strange, will softly settle within your mind, one that might linger long after these words have faded. This isn't about the day's headlines or the latest scientific breakthrough. Rather, it's the kind of question that might surface in the stillness of a late night, when your thoughts drift just a little further than usual. It asks simply, what if the very first intricate society on Earth wasn't in fact our own? It sounds, I know, like the opening of a classic science fiction narrative, a tale of ancient alien visitations or fabled sunken continents. But the possibility we're exploring is much, much closer to home, nestled within the deep, forgotten folds of our planet's history. Imagine, if you will, the immense tapestry of our planet's existence. Billions of years have unfurled, stretching back into a cosmic mist, so immeasurably vast that the entire saga of humanity, every empire, every innovation, every face you've ever glimpsed in history books, occupies merely the last, most delicate sliver of that timeline. The rest, a colossal expanse, is filled with the roar of primordial oceans, the fire of volcanoes, sprawling ancient forests, and the creeping embrace of ice ages. It's a canvas painted with creatures we can only ever hope to meet through fossilized whispers. And perhaps, just perhaps, something more. Something that thought and planned, that built and organized long before the first human hand ever reached for a tool, long before our earliest ancestors even stirred into being. Before we delve deeper into this intriguing thought, perhaps you might share, even if just to yourself, where you're listening from. Has the velvet cloak of night already embraced your surroundings, or does the gentle light of day still stream through your window? Are you journeying, watching the world glide by in a quiet blur, or are you nestled in that one cherished chair that always feels uniquely yours? Wherever you are, and whenever this moment finds you, we are meeting here, in this shared space, to lean into an idea that invites us to perceive a world now utterly unseen. If this gentle journey feels like the companionship you've been seeking, calm, steady, curious, unburdened by haste, then a quiet like a subscription, or even sharing it with another who might appreciate a few gentle thoughts tonight, would be deeply cherished. It's a small gesture, yet it helps these hushed conversations reach new ears, much like keeping a soft light glowing in a window for fellow travellers in the night. I'd be grateful if you gave it a like or subscribed, or even passed it along to someone who might need a few gentle thoughts tonight. Part 1. The Pre-Human Earth. A Silent Canvas. So, let us begin in the simplest of ways, by contemplating the Earth itself. Not the Earth as you and I experience it today, but the Earth as it was, long before any human foot left its mark upon its surface. There were no grand cities, no meticulously tilled fields, no intricate networks of roads, and certainly no voices that resonated like our own. There were, however, boundless skies, immense ever-shifting seas, and endless coastlines that have continuously sculpted and reshaped themselves across our oceans. Entire mountain ranges have majestically risen from the depths, and then, with geological patience, worn down into mere hills, all in the unfathomable stretches of time preceding humanity's arrival. If you were to gaze upon a map of the continents from that epoch, it would bear no resemblance to the familiar jigsaw puzzle you studied in schoolbooks. Land masses, like ponderous stony rafts, drift across the planet's fluid mantle over millions of years, colliding, fracturing, and sometimes, slowly, silently vanishing beneath the waves. It's tempting to imagine this pre-human Earth as an empty, pristine wilderness, devoid of complex life, but that would be a profound oversight. It was vibrant, teeming with creatures, each filling every conceivable corner, every ecological niche. Some glided through ancient oceans, some soared through primeval skies, others crept silently across the forest floor. Many bore no resemblance to anything alive today, and some of them, just perhaps, harboured the nascent sparks of something we might cautiously recognise as intelligence. Part 2. Intelligence, across time, a forgotten epoch. We as humans often cherish the notion of our intelligence as the singular defining trait that elevates us above all other species. But But the fascinating truth is that intelligence, in its myriad forms, is astonishingly scattered across the animal kingdom. Crows and parrots demonstrate complex problem-solving abilities. Dolphins exhibit self-awareness, recognizing their own reflections. Octopuses, with their alien grace, wield tools with astonishing dexterity. These are observations from our contemporary world with us in it. But what if there was a forgotten epoch when intelligence didn't merely flicker in isolated individuals or scattered groups, but instead coalesced into the very bedrock of an entire civilization? One that perhaps rose, flourished, and then, with equal majesty, fell, long before we ever arrived to bear witness. The profound challenge here is that Earth, our ancient host, possesses a peculiar, almost whimsical forgetfulness. It guards some secrets with obstinate resolve for unfathomably long durations, yet it erases others almost instantly, as if they were never truly there. A grand city constructed today, if left to the silent forces of abandonment, begins its slow, inexorable crumble within mere decades. In a few centuries it might be reduced to little more than picturesque ruins, heavily overgrown, its former glory veiled by verdant decay. A few millennia more, and the last discernible traces could dissipate, absorbed back into the land. Granted a few million years, and the very ground beneath it will have transformed, shifting and buckling. Weather, with its ceaseless erosion, will have worn down monumental stones. Rivers and seas, in their eternal meandering, will have carved new courses. Even the most resilient materials, metal and concrete, will be fragmented, scattered and ultimately buried beneath fresh layers of accumulating earth. It's not that the evidence is intentionally destroyed, but rather that the planet itself is a living palimpsest, constantly turning its own pages, writing new layers of history atop the old. If an earlier civilization had indeed flourished millions of years ago, could we even discern its faint echoes today? We like to believe so. Our imagination conjures images of intrepid archaeologists unearthing magnificent stone temples, intricate sculptures, and sophisticated tools. Yet, such a scenario primarily holds true for human history, precisely because our gaze reaches back only a comparatively short distance. The most ancient stone structures crafted by human hands are, in geological terms, a mere blink, approximately 12,000 years old. That's barely a breath compared to the Earth's venerable age. If we were to embark on a quest to locate something from, say, 50 million years ago, we would be searching within rock formations that materialized when that hypothetical civilization's cities might still have stood proud. And those ancient rocks, having endured unimaginable spans of time, would have been subjected to immense geological forces, compressed, twisted, fractured, even melted. They might have journeyed countless miles from their original place of formation. The older the geological layer, the less distinct its memory becomes. This profound challenge forms the very essence of what scientists sometimes refer to as the Silurian Hypothesis. The name itself, a whimsical nod to a piece of science fiction, cloaks an idea of genuine scientific inquiry. It asks with a deeply speculative gaze whether we could possibly detect the enduring signature of an industrial civilization within the geological record, millions of years later, even if no direct artifacts, no tools, no buildings remained. Would there be subtle chemical traces, perhaps layers containing unusual concentrations of metals, or discernible shifts in the atmospheric composition of the ancient past? Perhaps. Indeed, we know that our own industrial footprint has already etched its signature into the planet's memory. It's detectable in the pristine depths of ice cores, in the accumulating layers of marine sediments, and in the thin, haunting stratum of radioactive isotopes left behind by nuclear testing. These marks, in their own way, possess the resilience to persist for millions of years, long after our grandest buildings have dissolved into dust. But they are, by their very nature, subtle, easily overlooked unless one knows precisely what to seek. If this holds true, it opens up a peculiar, almost unsettling possibility. What if we have already, perhaps inadvertently, walked past the faint whispered traces of something far older without ever recognizing its true nature? A peculiar streak of metal embedded in a cliff face, a mineral deposit exhibiting an unusual chemical composition, We might have, with an understandable bias, simply classified it as a natural geological feature, never once contemplating that it could be the deliberate handiwork of a lost civilization. This isn't because scientists are lacking in diligence or curiosity. Rather, the very notion of a pre-human industrial civilization lies so far beyond the conventional boundaries of accepted scientific possibility that it wouldn't naturally be the first explanation anyone would consider. To simply ponder this idea doesn't demand belief in secret histories or hidden conspiracies. It's, in its purest form, an exercise in profound intellectual humility. We, as a species, tend to perceive ourselves as the first, the only, the ultimate pinnacle of life's journey on Earth. Yet, we are but a singular thread in a much vaster, ongoing narrative, a story still being written, and one that has already witnessed far more dramatic change and upheaval than we can comfortably visualize. We know, with scientific certainty, that mass extinctions have mercilessly reshaped the tree of life, again and again. We know that entire ecosystems can arise and then, in what is geologically speaking a mere blink, spectacularly collapse. And perhaps most importantly, we know that intelligence isn't a linear ladder, with us immovably fixed at the very top. It's a sprawling, intricately tangled network, a complex web that has branched and evolved in countless directions across time. So, if there was a civilization before us, what might it have truly been like?
And how did
that
it
is the
shape
profound
the world
question
we
we will
live
begin
in
to
today?
gently approach next. For now, it is enough to simply allow the idea to rest softly in your mind. To visualize the deep past not as an empty, primordial wilderness we sometimes imagine, but as something infinitely richer, stranger, and perhaps even more vibrant than our current understanding permits. The continents, in that distant epoch, were not in their familiar configurations. The very air might have felt different, perhaps heavier, warmer, or strikingly colder. The animals would have been utterly unrecognizable to our modern eyes, and somewhere within all that magnificent silent change, perhaps there were minds working together, shaping their environment, crafting their own stories, and then, with an almost cosmic grace, disappearing entirely, long before we ever had the slightest chance to meet them. Part 3. The deep geological memory of Earth. Long before humans created calendars or clocks, Earth had already existed for billions of years, enduring countless cycles of change. The continents we recognize today were once in entirely different positions, drifting slowly across a molten surface. Millions of years ago, the landmass configuration was alien, and the climate varied from tropical forests near the poles to vast ice sheets stretching towards the equator. Over time, ecosystems flourished and vanished, leaving traces in the rock record, the only evidence of Earth's dynamic history. Life on Earth flourished in every corner. The ocean floors teemed with creatures, never to see the sun. Vast forests, dominated by trees now extinct, thrived alongside strange, colossal creatures. Insects, ancient and enduring, were some of the earliest inhabitants, and birds evolved from smaller feathered dinosaurs. Mammals, though present, remained small for most of this time, overshadowed by the dominant reptiles. The landscapes, though familiar in some ways, were profoundly different in others. New plants, bizarre animals, and sounds never heard before. These creatures lived in complex social structures, herds, flocks, and colonies. They communicated in ways we can't fully understand, using sounds, colours, and movements that made sense to them but remain a mystery to us. This rich tapestry of life raises an intriguing possibility. Could a pre-human civilization have once existed? Could another species have used tools not just for survival, but for comfort, aesthetics, or intellectual curiosity? Human civilization evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, from small nomadic groups to complex societies. Intelligence developed gradually, shaped by the forces of nature and survival. If another species had similar cognitive abilities, could they have followed a similar path, modifying their environment and creating a civilization long before humans? The challenge lies in the incomplete historical record. Fossils, while valuable, tell us little about culture or behavior. Even preserved bones only hint at a species' existence, and most living organisms leave no trace. Artifacts like stone tools survive only if buried under specific conditions, but these are rare. Earth's surface is constantly recycled through tectonic movements, erosion, and other forces, making it difficult for traces of ancient civilizations to survive. Even if such traces were found, recognizing them would require the right context and insight. Consider a civilization that existed long before us, its cities, forests, and innovations erased over millions of years by rising seas, glaciers, and volcanic eruptions. Most of what they created would be gone, buried deep beneath the Earth's surface. A few remnants might survive, like fossilized trees, insects preserved in amber, or footprints in ancient mud, but these are cosmic accidents. The odds of finding an entire civilization intact are astronomically small, and even if we did find traces, we might not recognize them for what they are. This possibility invites curiosity, not belief in certainty. It's an open door to explore, asking what such a civilization might have been like. Would they have lived in vast cities or small, intimate communities? Would they have built with durable materials or perishable ones? Could they have reshaped their land to suit their needs, or left only the lightest marks on the world? Their art and culture might have been so foreign to us that we'd never recognize it. We may never have definitive answers, but the imagination can lead us to explore deeper questions. Scientists often form hypotheses based on imagination as much as evidence. The idea of a pre-human civilization can change how we study the past. The Earth has been many worlds over its long history, each with unique climates and life forms. Before humans, jungles flourished where deserts now stand, and ice sheets covered what are now seas. If intelligence arose before us, it would have existed within this ever-changing landscape. Its traces, though mostly lost, might have once been here. The idea of pre-human intelligence invites us to consider the possibility that we are part of a much larger ancient family of problem solvers. If other species had developed cognitive abilities like ours, they too may have dreamed, invented, and built. Just as we use tools and share knowledge, other species might have done the same. The intelligence needed for survival and adaptation is not an exclusive human trait. It exists across a spectrum in nature. From chimpanzees crafting tools to dolphins developing unique hunting techniques, the foundation of culture and intelligence stretches far beyond humanity. As we look back on Earth's deep past, we see a planet that has always been in flux, teeming with life and change. The idea that intelligence might have arisen before us doesn't require belief in a pre-human civilization, but invites us to explore the unimaginable. The Earth may hold the remnants of such a civilization, hidden beneath layers of time, waiting for us to recognize it for what it once was. If we consider the potential for ancient life to develop complex cooperation, planning, and innovation, it's not difficult to imagine a time when a branch of life could have evolved into something more sophisticated than we currently see in other species. The distinction between tool use and a full civilization comes down to time, environment, and cumulative knowledge. Over millions of years, even modest beginnings could have evolved into something extraordinary. But what would it take for such a leap to happen? Large brains help, but they are not enough on their own. Social structure plays a vital role. Intelligence thrives when a species needs to predict and understand the behaviors of others. Effective communication allows ideas to spread, preventing crucial discoveries from disappearing with a single individual. Most importantly, curiosity drives progress. The desire to understand the world beyond immediate survival needs can lead to breakthroughs. In our own history, a combination of these factors led to the rise of human civilization, but it's possible that, in some earlier epoch, these elements aligned within another species under different skies, with a different set of creatures. We often imagine intelligence in human terms: upright posture, fine motor control, and complex vocalizations. But intelligence can emerge in entirely different forms, depending on a species' biology. An intelligent species might have lived underwater, using fins or tentacles to manipulate their environment, or in the sky, using aerial perspectives to navigate and plan. Intelligence can be expressed in countless ways, not bound by our specific body plan. If such a species existed, their dreams and aspirations might have been as varied as ours. They might have developed strategies to hunt, raise their young, or communicate through stories, even if their methods were not immediately recognizable to us as language. Art, which serves no direct survival purpose, could have been a part of their culture, suggesting a deeper cognitive ability. The fact that art exists implies a mind capable of valuing beauty, symbolism, or creation itself, a mind that might leave subtle, enduring traces worth seeking. However, most dreams, including our own, never leave physical evidence. Even in recorded history, only a small fraction of what civilizations produce survives. The older the potential evidence, the more likely it is to be lost. Civilizations create vast amounts, but time erodes nearly everything. Stone and fired clay survive longer than wood or fibers, and metal corrodes over time. Without fortuitous preservation, much of what a civilization builds disappears. Even in modern cities, without constant maintenance, buildings crumble and roads crack. In a few centuries, only faint outlines may remain. In a few thousand years, even that will be gone. In millions of years, it may all disappear. This is why scientists look for indirect, subtle signs of past civilizations. They examine changes in rock chemistry, shifts in ancient climates, or unusual material deposits that could suggest industrial activity. These geological traces are less vulnerable to erosion than physical buildings or tools, offering faint footprints of a civilization that might have existed long ago. However, distinguishing artificial from natural formations is challenging, especially over millions of years. Yet, the possibility remains that the first minds capable of abstract thought once took tentative steps towards something greater than survival. They may have lived in small groups, learned to seek shelter, and discovered the use of fire, slowly transforming their world. If they reached a point where they could alter their environment on a large scale, they might have spread to new areas, adapting their lives to different resources and climates. Trade could have emerged, fostering greater interaction between groups. Over time, their knowledge would accumulate, leading to something akin to early cities, populated centers where ideas, goods, and specialized skills converged. The path they followed would be similar to our own, and evolution could have laid it down more than once. Whether they left traces we can find today is a separate matter. The fossil and geological record is incomplete, even for species whose existence is certain. Much of Earth's history is missing, and only scattered fragments remain. This is why the idea of a pre-human civilization is difficult to prove or disprove. The absence of evidence doesn't necessarily mean there was no such civilization. It's simply the result of how our planet functions. Time relentlessly reshapes the Earth, covering delicate traces of the past. But we can still imagine those first minds, picturing them in landscapes long since vanished, hearing their voices in sounds we can no longer decipher. The question then evolves: what does civilization truly mean? We often think of civilization in terms of stone buildings, roads, art, and writing systems, things that endure and leave lasting marks on the planet. But civilization, at its core, is about a sustained, organized way of life where knowledge, culture, and technology evolve over generations. A group of intelligent beings could have lived in simple structures made from natural materials, leaving no lasting ruins, but still embodying civilization through organized systems, shared knowledge, and environmental adaptation. The scale of a civilization is not always massive. Human civilization began in scattered, interconnected communities without a central authority, yet it still advanced due to the exchange of ideas and accumulated knowledge. If a pre-human civilization existed, it might not have looked like ancient Rome or Mesopotamia. It could have relied on different resource strategies, shaped by the specific biology and environment of the species. The concept of a city might have been different, dynamic seasonal gathering places rather than permanent settlements. Defining civilization often leads us to measure it against our own standards, particularly monumental architecture or writing systems. But societies can maintain complex knowledge through oral traditions, woven structures, or natural materials that leave no permanent trace. A non-human civilization might have altered ecosystems without leaving obvious artifacts, with evidence manifesting in subtle patterns, shifted waterways, unusual soil compositions, or the appearance of non-native plant species. We risk overlooking such traces if we limit our definition of civilization to what we recognize from human history. Civilizations do not require monumental stone buildings or metal tools. The markers of civilization include long-distance trade, specialized labor, symbolic expression, and the ability to sustain larger communities. These features could also exist in the fossil record of a non-human species, though identifying them would be a significant challenge. The duration of a civilization matters too. In geological terms, 1,000 years is a blink of an eye, but the environmental impact can be immense. Forests may be cut down, rivers diverted, species transported. Such changes might appear in sediment layers, offering clues about past human activity. If a pre-human civilization had enough time to leave a similar impact, traces might still be detectable today. Ultimately, nature can produce patterns that seem artificial, making it difficult to distinguish between natural and man-made alterations. A rounded hill could be a volcanic remnant, not a constructed mound. Straight lines in rock formations may result from geological faulting, not design. Extensive vegetation shifts could be due to climate changes rather than deliberate planting. To confidently identify traces of a true civilization, we would need multiple converging lines of evidence: altered land, anomalous material deposits, and possibly fossilized remains showing behavior beyond instinct. In the end, the physical form of the civilization, whether humanoid or radically different, is less important than the underlying markers of intelligence: organization, cooperation, shared knowledge, and the ability to alter the environment. The possibility of pre-human civilizations reminds us that intelligence may be rare in the cosmos, but not unique to us. Earth may have hosted intelligence before, and perhaps will again. Imagine a civilization that could have been aquatic, expertly navigating a submerged world, or flighted, crafting ephemeral structures high in trees or cliffs. Their intelligence might have manifested in aerial navigation, or communal construction, or even in bioarchitecture that evolved over time. This idea challenges our conventional understanding of civilization, forcing us to reconsider how intelligence and culture might appear outside of our own human framework. It suggests that civilization doesn't always have to resemble the monumental stone cities and bronze tools we are familiar with. Our concept of what is civilized is deeply rooted in human history, but the rules we perceive as universal could merely be the customs of our species. Even now we observe species like elephants, who shape their environment by felling trees and digging waterholes. Some birds build complex reusable structures over generations, while whales communicate across vast distances with complex songs. While none of these behaviors meet the strict definition of civilization, they demonstrate how close other species can come to it. In different environments, and given vast amounts of time, these species could have crossed the threshold into what we consider civilization. The next question arises: how would we search for such a civilization in Earth's distant past? It wouldn't involve dramatic discoveries like perfect ruins, but rather the careful identification of subtle, almost imperceptible anomalies in the geological and fossil records. This task would require collaboration among geologists, chemists, paleontologists, and archaeologists, each scrutinizing existing data with fresh eyes. The challenge is enormous, but it's worth considering given the immense timescale we're dealing with. Earth has billions of years of history, and we know at least one civilization, our own, that has modified the planet. Could others have existed? The search for ancient civilizations begins not with grand monuments, but with finding faint clues, subtle shifts in mineral compositions, unusual materials, or sudden, unexplained changes in ancient climates. Geological layers, for example, may hold signs of massive industrial activity. Such signs would be more enduring than physical structures, which erode over time. However, even these geological clues can be tricky. Nature often creates strange patterns that could be mistaken for deliberate human activity, making the process of identifying artificial traces incredibly difficult. The fossil record, crucial for understanding ancient life, is inherently incomplete. Fossils are rare and fragile, often replaced by minerals through geological processes. The conditions required for fossilization are exceptional, and in areas with dynamic environments, organic remains rarely survive. Even within human history, our footprints are unevenly preserved. Cities in deserts or fertile floodplains leave durable remains, but coastal settlements may be erased by rising seas or buried beneath shifting sediments. When searching for an ancient civilization, this bias in preservation poses an enormous challenge. Stretching this over millions of years, entire civilizations could vanish without a trace. If an advanced society existed on what is now the ocean floor, its traces could be locked deep beneath miles of water and sediment. Similarly, civilizations living in lush, forested lands later scoured by glaciers might leave no recognizable evidence. Scientists know the inherent limitations of fossil records. Their work involves piecing together fragments, understanding that any discovery is just one point in a larger, often invisible web of life. Sometimes, the most important finds are not perfectly preserved specimens, but tiny fragments, like a single tooth revealing diet and age, or pollen trapped in ancient sediment telling stories of past climates. Chemical signatures in rocks can point to volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, or sudden atmospheric shifts, possibly signaling something extraordinary, like an ancient civilization. Our modern industrial activity has already altered the Earth's atmosphere, leaving behind traces detectable for millions of years. Plastics, synthetic metals, and other human-made compounds are slowly permeating sediments worldwide. Even if our grand buildings were to vanish, these chemical traces would remain, offering subtle evidence of our presence. But nature itself is capable of creating patterns that seem artificial. Volcanic eruptions, ecological die-offs, and shifts in ocean currents can cause dramatic, localized changes, mimicking signs of human activity. Despite this, anomalies that resist conventional explanations exist. Some deep rock layers have shown sudden shifts in mineral composition, hinting at the rapid introduction of unusual materials. Though many of these anomalies have natural explanations, the possibility remains that some of them could point to ancient intelligence at work, shaping the environment in ways we don't fully recognize. Uncovering such evidence would require immense patience and collaboration. The discovery of a lost civilization wouldn't look like the unearthing of a pristine artifact. Instead, it would involve carefully sifting through layers of geological and chemical clues, piecing together faint traces into a broader, albeit blurry picture. In the case of a pre-human civilization, this picture might never fully come together. The evidence might remain a collection of faint hints, always inviting speculation without providing definitive answers. Our understanding of the past is based on fragments scattered across the globe, written in a language we are still learning to read. The fossil record shows us that life has taken forms far stranger than we imagined, and entire branches of evolution have flourished and disappeared, leaving behind only the faintest traces. The world we know is just the latest version of Earth, one that has constantly reinvented itself. In this context, the idea of a civilization lost to time doesn't seem entirely impossible. If such a civilization existed, it might have relied on materials that degrade quickly, or have lived in an area later submerged or covered by glaciers. Its evidence could be subtle, like altered waterways, rare compound deposits, or mineral distributions that suggest large-scale extraction. Identifying these traces would require the deep expertise of geologists, chemists, and archaeologists, as well as a willingness to entertain extraordinary possibilities. This openness does not mean jumping to conclusions, but rather leaving intellectual space for the unknown, acknowledging that some of Earth's most profound surprises are still waiting to be recognized. As we search for evidence of the past, we must embrace the uncertainty. The Earth's memory is not like ours, delicate and full of personal recollections, but slow, vast, and written in layers of rock, ice, and sediment. It is a memory constantly rewriting itself, erasing some things and preserving others. The idea that a civilization existed long before us, leaving only faint geological traces, is deeply intriguing. However, such traces would require extraordinary geological luck to survive, and even then, they might be distorted beyond recognition by heat, pressure, or the forces of time. The Earth's surface has been reshaped over millions of years, and much of the history we seek has been lost. The search for deep history isn't about finding intact artifacts, but fragments that have survived despite everything working against them. The further back we look, the more we must accept that the record is incomplete. Whole stretches of history are irretrievably lost, not because they are hidden, but because they have been erased by the relentless forces of nature. What remains is a reminder that the Earth's ancient history, like our own, is full of mysteries, some of which we may never fully uncover. Even the faintest traces of past civilizations, if they ever existed, could still be hiding beneath the surface, waiting for us to recognize them, not as the obvious, dramatic remains of a grand empire, but as subtle, enduring echoes of lives and minds long gone. Part 4. The Fragility of Civilization, a Vanishing Act. The ocean floor, often seen as a stable repository of history, is in reality a constantly shifting, recycling environment. The crust beneath the oceans is geologically young, rarely more than 200 million years old, and constantly regenerated at mid-ocean ridges, with older material being pushed back into the Earth's mantle. Anything older than this, no matter how well preserved, is destroyed and reintegrated into the planet's interior. Land masses, while more enduring, are also reshaped by processes like uplift, erosion, and the slow shifting of continents, which continually alter coastlines and climates, erasing much of what existed before. This ongoing geological turnover is why the fossil record is so fragmented. Life was not absent during missing periods, but conditions for preservation simply didn't exist. Earth's history, like an ancient library, has entire books lost, others rewritten, and many transformed into new volumes. What survives are fragmented chapters, often incomplete or too weathered to fully comprehend. This imperfect record is all scientists have to work with. Finding a well-preserved fossil is an extraordinary rarity, resulting from the perfect alignment of rapid burial, stable conditions, and protection from decay. The same applies to any potential evidence of a lost civilization. An artifact would have to be buried swiftly and protected for millions of years. Even under such ideal conditions, its recognition would be challenging. A worked piece of stone might be mistaken for a natural geological formation, or an unusual mineral deposit could be attributed to natural chemistry. Without a clear context, multiple associated findings pointing in the same direction, it would be easy to overlook or misinterpret subtle clues. This realization fundamentally changes how we approach the search for a lost civilization. We must consider how those creations would interact with the immense forces of time, subduction, and decay. The reality is, most would not survive at all. What Earth does remember are chemical traces locked in ancient rocks, tiny fossils sealed in amber, and delicate impressions preserved in primordial mud. These fragments, against all odds, survive the planet's constant reshaping. They may not provide a complete picture, but offer some insight, however fragmented. The rest is lost, as if it never existed. If Earth can erase almost everything we've built in just a few million years, it's plausible that it did the same to past civilizations. The question then becomes whether we've overlooked subtle clues, or if they remain buried, waiting for the right conditions to be uncovered. This leads us to wonder, if intelligence existed before us, what forms of life might have developed it? When we think of the age of reptiles, we often envision dinosaurs as towering predators or massive herbivores. But the Mesozoic era, which lasted over 160 million years, offered more than just giant creatures. There was space for small, quick, and clever species. Some dinosaurs may have been cunning hunters, relying on precision and strategy rather than sheer strength. It is in this era, during the height of dinosaur evolution, that we might look for signs of a pre-human civilization, not because we imagine dinosaurs building cities, but because evolution had millions of years to explore a variety of life forms and behaviors. The small theropod dinosaurs related to birds had relatively large brains for their size. While brain size alone doesn't determine intelligence, it provides clues. Species with larger brain-to-body ratios often exhibit more complex behaviors and adaptability. Some theropods showed signs of cooperative hunting and parental care, traits that could form the basis for more advanced social structures. Birds, the living descendants of dinosaurs, demonstrate remarkable problem-solving abilities. If modern birds can achieve such cognitive complexity, it's not out of the question that their ancient ancestors could have had similar, or even greater, capacities. However, intelligence alone doesn't equate to civilization. Creating a civilization requires the ability to manipulate the environment in lasting, deliberate ways. This presents a problem. Dinosaurs, as we understand them, didn't have the versatile limbs humans do. Some had grasping claws, but crafting tools in the way humans do might have been a challenge. Still, this doesn't rule out the possibility that they might have developed technologies suited to their own anatomy. perhaps using their claws and mouths to craft rudimentary tools, or collaborating in groups to build structures. If a civilization had existed during the age of dinosaurs, it might have looked very different from our own. They could have lived in sheltered valleys or along river courses, constructing buildings from plant materials, mud, or stone. These structures would have been far more vulnerable to time, however. The Earth has undergone immense shifts since the last non-avian dinosaurs disappeared. Continents have moved, mountains have risen and eroded, and oceans have changed their courses. Any buildings they might have constructed would likely have been destroyed, leaving only faint traces behind. The challenge of preservation is profound. Organic materials like wood and plants decay rapidly, and even stone structures can be worn away over millions of years. The shifting of tectonic plates, the rise of glaciers, and the erosion of landscapes all contribute to the destruction of ancient structures. If a civilization existed, its traces would likely have been erased by these geological forces. However, it's not impossible that some evidence might remain, buried deep beneath layers of sediment or found in coastal regions once submerged under shallow seas. Fossils of marine life have been found in desert cliffs and mountain ranges, showing that even the most dramatic changes can preserve traces of past life. In addition to physical evidence, chemical markers in sediments could provide clues to an ancient civilization. For example, large-scale environmental modifications like systematic farming or energy use could leave distinct traces in the chemistry of the ocean or soil. Our industrial activities have already altered the atmosphere, leaving behind detectable layers of carbon and synthetic materials. These changes will persist for millions of years, potentially offering future generations clues about the civilizations that created them. The problem, however, lies in recognizing these traces. If a marine civilization existed, its structures might have been made of materials that are now lost to decay. Organic materials would have dissolved, and even stone constructions could be buried by shifting sediments. But chemical traces in the environment, such as rare mineral deposits or changes in sediment composition, could hint at past activities. Similarly, fossilized remains of the species itself could provide direct evidence, though recognizing them might be difficult without a modern analogue to compare them to. This raises the possibility that an intelligent marine species could have developed its own unique technologies, adapted to underwater environments. They might have used shells, coral, volcanic rocks, or plant fibers to create structures. Communication could have been based on sound or light, much like how whales communicate over vast distances. Their art might have been expressed through intricate patterns of shells or living coral formations, and their technology could have involved manipulating the seafloor itself. The preservation of such a civilization would be even more fragile than that of land-based civilizations. The oceans, constantly changing and recycling, would have erased most evidence. However, if a civilization existed in shallow waters or near coastlines, it's possible that some remnants might survive in buried layers, waiting for the right geological conditions to be uncovered. While the idea of an ancient marine civilization seems speculative, it opens up intriguing possibilities. The oceans, with their relatively stable environments, might have allowed for a unique form of civilization to flourish. Although we have little physical evidence, the search for subtle chemical or geological markers offers a tantalizing glimpse into what might have been. If a civilization existed in the depths of the oceans, its legacy might not lie in grand monuments, but in the faintest of traces, waiting to be uncovered by future scientists with the right tools and insight. In conclusion, while the idea of an ancient civilization, whether terrestrial or marine, is speculative, it challenges us to think beyond the boundaries of our own history. The Earth's vast, dynamic history has seen countless species rise and fall, some of which might have developed intelligence and culture in ways we cannot yet imagine. The quest for understanding these possibilities requires us to expand our definition of civilization and consider what might survive the relentless forces of time and nature. Whether the traces of these civilizations are buried in the earth or the ocean, the search for their memory continues, inviting us to reimagine what intelligence and culture might look like on a planet that has constantly reinvented itself over millions of years. The ocean floor, often seen as a stable repository of history, is constantly shifting and recycling. The oceanic crust is geologically young, rarely older than 200 million years. It's created at mid-ocean ridges and then pushed back into the Earth's mantle. Anything older than that has been destroyed and reintegrated into the planet's interior. Similarly, land masses are continually reshaped by uplift, erosion, and the shifting of continents, erasing what existed before. This constant geological turnover is why the fossil record is so fragmented. It's not that life was absent during missing epochs. The conditions just didn't allow for preservation. The Earth's history is like an ancient library where books have been consumed by fire, rewritten and rebound into new volumes. What remains are scattered chapters, often incomplete or weathered beyond recognition. This fragmented record is all that scientists have to work with. Discovering well-preserved fossils is rare, the result of rapid burial, stable conditions, and protection from decay. The same would apply to evidence of a lost civilization. For such evidence to survive, it would need to be buried swiftly and protected for millions of years. Even then, recognizing it would be challenging. A worked piece of stone might be mistaken for a natural formation, and an anomalous mineral deposit could be seen as the result of natural chemistry. Without clear context, subtle clues might be overlooked or misinterpreted. This reality fundamentally changes how we approach the possibility of a lost civilization. It's not enough to imagine what they might have built. We must consider how their creations would interact with the relentless forces of time and decay. Most likely little of it would survive. What the Earth does remember, though, are chemical traces in ancient rocks, tiny fossils sealed in amber, and delicate impressions in hardened mud. These fragments slip through the dynamic rewriting of the Earth's surface. They're invaluable because they offer some picture, even if it's incomplete. But much is lost as if it never existed. Earth's memory is immensely long but profoundly selective, and it guards its deepest secrets with an almost unyielding resolve. If intelligent beings existed before us, their presence may now only be a faint signature, if that. The question is whether we have overlooked these subtle traces, or if they remain deeply buried, waiting for the right geological conditions to be uncovered. This brings us to consider the creatures of Earth's past that didn't dominate in size or make dramatic impacts, but might have discovered their own pathways to complexity. We often imagine prehistory through the lens of the largest creatures, dinosaurs, mammoths, and saber-tooths. But Earth's story was also shaped by smaller, less conspicuous animals. Some of these creatures might have developed intelligence and social cooperation that never earned them a place in our fossil record. These forgotten builders could have thrived in stable environments where resources were abundant, allowing for cultural growth and experimentation. Intelligence doesn't always evolve under the intense glare of ecological pressures. Sometimes it grows quietly in the margins, where survival allows time for learning and innovation. Today, we see similar behaviors in animals that hint at the seeds of civilization-like behavior. Beavers dramatically alter rivers to create tranquil ponds, demonstrating environmental engineering. Certain birds build complex nests, showcasing remarkable individuality and regional styles. Some primates create social hierarchies and pass down innovative tool use techniques. Ants and termites construct elaborate cities with ventilation systems and specialized chambers for tasks. While none of these behaviors fully meet our definition of civilization, they show how environmental pressures and social behavior can create the conditions for more complex societies over time. If a forgotten builder species existed, it might have combined several traits: an ability to manipulate the environment, problem-solving skills, and a culture of knowledge transmission. They might not have dominated the world, but they could have flourished in a specific stable range, adapting their surroundings to their needs in ways that left few lasting traces. Their physical form could have been anything, from small, nimble mammals with dexterous paws, to intelligent birds with strong beaks and versatile feet, to reptiles or amphibians with adaptable limbs. These species would have used their bodies to intentionally shape their environment. What they built could have been crafted from organic, biodegradable materials, woven shelters, dugout chambers, or elevated platforms. These structures would not have lasted long, especially in humid climates where rot and insect activity quickly take their toll. Over millions of years, even the subtle soil patterns they left behind could be erased by erosion or geological processes. The challenge in discovering any traces of such a species is the same as with any lost civilization. The vast majority would be gone. we would need to search for indirect subtle signs. If their building practices altered water flow, there might be unusual sediment patterns or layers rich in specific minerals. If they cultivated plants, the fossil pollen record might reveal an abundance of species far outside their natural range. If they hunted in organized ways, there could be patterns of animal remains indicating deliberate activity. However, these signs could be ambiguous. Natural processes, like rivers shifting their courses or animals spreading seeds, can mimic the effects of intelligent behavior. We also have to consider how we define intelligence. We tend to measure intelligence by our own standards, language, symbolic art, and tools. But there may be other profound expressions of intelligence that don't leave behind obvious artifacts. A forgotten builder species could have developed oral traditions, memory-based mapping of landscapes, or intricate seasonal gatherings to transmit knowledge. These cultural practices would have left no physical trace once the species disappeared. It's possible that species we now see as ordinary animals once possessed far more cognitive complexity than we realize. Evolution is not a steady climb toward greater complexity. It's a dynamic process with traits appearing, disappearing, and sometimes reappearing in different forms. Such a species might have coexisted with others, possibly even competing with them. The fossil record shows that many species successfully coexisted, and sometimes the more adaptable species outcompeted others. If this happened, the builders might have been erased, not just by geological forces, but by their more dominant rivals. Just as cultures can vanish when confronted with competition or environmental change, an entire civilization might have disappeared without leaving a trace. In the modern world, we've seen how quickly cultures can vanish, and how knowledge can disappear in a single generation. Entire languages have been lost, and innovations can fade when cultures are displaced or destroyed. Stretching this concept over millions of years, it becomes easy to imagine how a civilization, especially a small or geographically isolated one, could vanish without leaving discernible traces. If such a species did exist, it might have been as intelligent and innovative as humans, but their civilization would have been very different. They might not have needed to dominate every corner of the Earth. Instead, they could have flourished within a limited range, adapting their surroundings in ways that left little behind. Their achievements might not have been in monumental buildings or tools, but in cultural practices that simply didn't survive the passage of time. The idea of these forgotten builders invites humility. It reminds us that life on Earth is far older and more complex than our own brief history. Intelligence and culture could have arisen in countless forms before our time, and the world we know today is just one of many possibilities. The search for traces of these lost civilizations requires us to think differently. Instead of looking for obvious ruins, we must search for subtle patterns in soil chemistry, plant and animal distribution, and geological features. These indirect signs could reveal the profound impact of intelligent species, even if their civilization left no obvious physical artifacts. In conclusion, the Earth's deep history might hold the secrets of civilizations that were once as advanced as ours, but whose traces have been erased by time. The search for these civilizations may never provide definitive answers, but the possibility remains that intelligence, culture, and innovation have risen and vanished before, hidden in the most unexpected places, awaiting the right conditions to be discovered. When we look back into the past, we often confront the challenge of interpreting the clues left behind. Absolute certainty is rare. As time passes, details blur and merge. A single layer of sediment, which might have taken centuries to form, can mix together different events that occurred far apart. Over millions of years, geological forces and chemical changes can distort or erase the original material. As sediments are moved, eroded, and redeposited, even the most promising discoveries might end up far from their original context, complicating their interpretation. Despite these challenges, the potential to uncover traces of ancient civilizations remains. If a past civilization engaged in activities like large-scale farming, metallurgy, or energy production, some evidence might still survive in stable regions, particularly in areas with minimal geological change. The key task is to locate these stable environments and interpret the layers with precision to differentiate extraordinary actions from natural processes. In our own time, we've seen how human activity dramatically reshapes the sedimentary record. Industrial centres leave distinct chemical markers, such as residues from leaded gasoline or radioactive isotopes from nuclear tests. Even in remote regions such as pristine lakes or deep polar ice, the sediments still carry the fingerprints of human industry, and these changes will persist for millions of years. If we can leave such a mark in a short time, it begs the question, what would the equivalent traces of a truly ancient civilization look like? If this civilization was industrial, the sediments might carry subtle traces of energy sources, burning biomass, smelting metals, or harnessing unfamiliar energy. If they altered landscapes for agriculture, the fossil pollen record might reveal sudden changes in plant composition. Coastal or river-based settlements could leave the densest clues in those regions. There's also the possibility that an ancient civilization might have used materials that don't immediately seem artificial. Plastics, for instance, didn't exist in nature before humans invented them. Millions of years from now, these materials might persist as microscopic particles, easily mistaken for natural substances. Similarly, a non-human civilization might have created unique materials that now appear as unusual mineral inclusions, potentially overlooked unless we know what to seek. Reading these sediments requires immense patience and careful interpretation. Each core sample or exposed cliff face is a puzzle with missing pieces. The challenge is not just to collect clues, but to ask the right questions. Are we witnessing the effects of climate, geology, biology, or something else? Perhaps intelligent, deliberate action. The deeper we go into the layers, the more we realize how much they conceal. They are both witnesses and participants in Earth's narrative, recording events even as they are reshaped by them. If a civilization left its mark, it would resemble a faint ghost in the record. Partial, easily mistaken for something natural. Finding it requires skill and a willingness to perceive intelligence where we typically see only nature's hand. If such a civilization existed, its traces would likely be subtle, hidden in plain sight, requiring a shift in how we think about what counts as civilization. Instead of monumental structures, we might find indirect signs, changes in water flow, mineral deposits, or unusual plant growth. Fossilized pollen, for example, could indicate large-scale agricultural practices, and sediment layers rich in certain metals could suggest mining or energy production. However, these clues could also be the result of natural processes, such as river shifts or volcanic activity, making them difficult to identify without a broader context. To fully interpret these signs, we must consider what we know about natural processes and how they can mimic human-like activity. Volcanoes can release heavy metals into the environment, and floods can deposit sediment in unusual ways. Thus, recognizing the deliberate influence of a past civilization requires distinguishing between natural occurrences and subtle traces of intelligent action. Intelligence, as we understand it, often involves creating tools, structures, or complex societies. However, intelligence might also manifest in more ephemeral forms, through oral traditions, memory-based navigation, or seasonal gatherings. These forms of cultural expression could have left no physical trace but still represent sophisticated behaviours. If a civilization did exist, it might have developed without the need for grand monuments, relying instead on practices that were adapted to their environment, leaving behind only faint ecological footprints. The search for these lost civilizations leads us to consider not just what we can find, but how we define intelligence itself. We tend to measure intelligence by cognitive abilities like language and tools, but other species also exhibit complex behaviors, such as problem-solving, tool use, and social cooperation. Ants and termites build intricate nests, and certain birds create complex nests with materials from their environment. These behaviors show that intelligence can arise in ways that don't require monumental architecture or advanced technology. A forgotten builder species might have combined several traits: an ability to manipulate the environment, problem-solving skills, and cultural transmission. They may not have dominated the planet but could have flourished in specific stable environments, adapting their surroundings to suit their needs. Their physical form could have been anything: small mammals with dexterous paws, large birds with strong beaks, or reptiles with adaptable limbs. They might have created shelters from organic materials, woven fibres, mud, or branches. These structures would have been ephemeral, decaying quickly, leaving little behind. Over millions of years, even the faintest signs, soil patterns, shifts in water flow, could be erased by erosion or geological activity. The challenge in discovering such a species is profound. The majority of their works would likely be gone, leaving only subtle evidence. If they significantly altered the landscape, we might find unusual patterns in sediment or changes in plant or animal remains. Even these signs, however, could be misinterpreted as natural processes. We must approach the search with an open mind, ready to recognize patterns that suggest intelligent, deliberate action, even if they don't fit traditional definitions of civilization. The idea of these forgotten builders reminds us of the vastness of Earth's history. We are but one species in a long line of potential civilizations. Earth's history has witnessed the rise and fall of many life forms, some of which might have reached levels of intelligence and culture that never left recognizable traces. The search for these traces requires thinking beyond the obvious, looking for subtle signs that might indicate intelligent behavior, even in the absence of physical structures or tools. Our modern understanding of intelligence and civilization is shaped by our own experiences, but it's essential to consider that other forms of intelligence could have arisen in vastly different ways. The search for evidence of these lost civilizations challenges us to rethink our assumptions and approach the past with a deeper understanding of how life on Earth has evolved. Whether these civilizations were terrestrial or aquatic, the clues they left behind may be faint, but they could reveal a profound story of intelligence and culture long before our own. In conclusion, the idea of a forgotten civilization challenges our understanding of Earth's history and our place in it. While the physical traces of such civilizations may be lost, subtle signs could remain in the environment, waiting for the right questions to be asked. These civilizations might not have left behind monumental structures, but their impact on the planet, in ways we don't yet understand, could still be uncovered. The search for these lost civilizations requires patience, imagination, and an openness to possibilities beyond our current understanding. The Earth's dynamic surface is in constant, relentless recycling. Erosion, subduction, and the churning of the crust continuously erase most direct evidence of past civilizations. Grand structures decay, metals corrode, even stable compounds eventually break down. The older a hypothetical civilization, the less likely its artifacts will endure. This is why scientists focus on indirect evidence, particularly chemical and isotopic signals, which can survive long after physical artifacts have vanished. Industrial activity produces unique combinations of elements that don't occur naturally. Large-scale agriculture can alter plant distributions and soils in ways that persist for millions of years. Fossil fuels shift carbon isotope ratios, a change that is difficult to replicate through natural processes. These markers could outlast a civilization's physical structures, deeply embedded in rock layers long after cities have crumbled. The Silurian Hypothesis invites us to rethink what constitutes civilization. We typically imagine bustling cities, monumental structures, and intricate road networks, products of our specific biology and environment. A non-human civilization might have been vastly different, leaving far fewer durable traces. This civilization could have relied on organic, biodegradable materials, renewable energy, and decentralized settlements, making their traces faint or nearly undetectable. Even if they existed in a geologically unstable region, their signals could have been erased by tectonic forces. Schmidt and Frank in their research sought abrupt, inexplicable changes in the geological record, sudden spikes in elements, anomalous isotope shifts, or unexplained ancient climate events that might resemble modern human impacts. Some of these changes can be explained by natural causes like volcanic eruptions or asteroid impacts, while others remain ambiguous. These anomalies are not definitive proof of a lost civilization, but intriguing deviations, open to interpretation and further study. Schmidt and Frank also pointed out that our own civilization could serve as a cautionary tale. If humanity vanished tomorrow, the traces we leave would be clear at first, but in geological terms they wouldn't last long. In a few million years, physical structures would disappear, leaving only chemical and isotopic changes that would fade with time. The deeper the burial, the greater the chance that heat and pressure would erase the signal entirely. This perspective shifts the search for ancient civilizations from seeking ruins to interpreting the subtle, chemical narrative embedded in Earth's layers. The Silurian Hypothesis doesn't claim that such a civilization definitively existed. Instead, it's a framework designed to explore the limits of what we could potentially know. The absence of evidence in deep time doesn't confirm its non-existence, but the failure to find certain types of evidence does tell us something significant. It turns speculation into a testable scientific question. It also extends to the future. How would our civilization's signature compare to the extensive impact we've already made? And if we find signs of life on other planets, will we recognize the subtle signals of civilizations profoundly different from our own? The Silurian Hypothesis is a mirror, urging us to examine our own impact on Earth from the perspective of an intelligent species studying us millions of years from now. It reminds us that we may not be the first to reshape this planet in significant ways, and that civilization might not be unique to humans. Time, as an eraser, can smooth away even the sharpest marks, leaving only faint echoes for the curious to uncover. If traces of a long-forgotten civilization exist, we must ask, could we understand them? Communication in a lost civilization. When we think of communication in a lost civilization, we often imagine familiar forms, written symbols, sounds shaped into words, or gestures imbued with specific meaning. But language, at its core, is simply a method of transmitting information. It can take forms far beyond anything we have created. If a civilization existed before ours, their communication system could have been so different that even if we discovered it, we might not recognize it as language at all. Language is shaped by biology. Humans have a unique vocal apparatus, a specific hearing range, and a highly developed sense of vision, all influencing how we communicate. A non-human civilization might have evolved different sensory capabilities, relying on frequencies outside our hearing range or visual communication outside the human spectrum. Their communication could involve sounds, light signals, or even chemical cues, traveling through mediums like water or air in ways we cannot perceive. We observe sophisticated communication systems in modern species. Dolphins use intricate bursts of sound, cephalopods like octopuses change colour to convey messages, and ants use pheromones to communicate. Each system is adapted to the species' biology and environment. If we encountered the remains of such systems without the living species to demonstrate them, we would struggle to interpret them. For instance, if we found a fossilized octopus but had no understanding of its colour-changing abilities, the significance would be lost. Even human writing poses challenges for interpretation. We typically look for repeated shapes, spacing, and sequences, but alien writing might not be linear. It could combine spatial arrangements, textures, and chemical properties, readable only under specific conditions like ultraviolet light or tactile perception. Without the right context, such writing could appear as random markings or mineral deposits. Deciphering ancient human scripts often requires a Rosetta Stone to compare languages. For a non-human language, the conceptual gap could be vast, with cultural references and sensory experiences unfamiliar to us. They might not use distinct words as we do. Some species' communication relies on continuous variation, not discrete symbols. There's a humbling possibility that we may have already encountered remnants of a non-human language and failed to recognize it. Intricate patterns in ancient rocks, arranged shells, or recurring chemical anomalies might be dismissed as natural phenomena because we lack the cognitive framework to perceive them as intelligent acts. If we were to recognize a deliberate pattern, the next step, understanding it, would be a monumental task, requiring a deep contextual understanding. The impermanence of art. The idea of a lost civilization inevitably brings up art, storytelling, and cultural expression. Art, traditionally seen as a human trait, might have also existed in other species. Even today we observe species like bowerbirds, which create intricate structures, or whales, which sing evolving songs, suggesting artistic expression. If a past civilization engaged in art for aesthetic reasons, their works might have been as impermanent as their language, fragile and ephemeral. Materials used in art would have mattered greatly. Organic pigments, plant fibres, and natural materials decay quickly, leaving little behind. If art was made from biodegradable materials, nothing would endure. Even stone carvings can be eroded by weather or buried under sediments over millions of years. But in rare conditions, art can survive. Deep caves, arid deserts, or volcanic ash can protect it for millennia. If the civilization's art was primarily organic, its survival chances are slim. Yet, subtle indirect evidence might remain. Unusual patterns in fossils, shifts in plant growth, or microscopic wear patterns on tools used for shaping. The search for evidence. The search for art or language from a non-human civilization is profoundly difficult. It's not just about finding obvious symbols, but understanding the context in which they were created. Different sensory worlds might have shaped their communication and art. If their culture relied on impermanence, they might have left no permanent record. However, indirect evidence could still exist, such as altered plant growth or changes in animal behavior. The absence of physical traces doesn't mean a civilization didn't exist. A species might have lived in perfect harmony with the environment, leaving behind no visible evidence. The challenge is to look beyond our preconceived notions of what constitutes evidence of civilization, and open ourselves to the possibility that intelligence and culture can take forms radically different from our own. The deep search for these traces involves reading the Earth's subtle chemical and biological records, and recognizing that the past may contain far more than we expect, if only we know where to look. In the end, the possibility of a long-lost civilization, whether on land or underwater, pushes us to question our assumptions about intelligence, culture, and the very nature of civilization itself. Art, often perceived as an expression of culture, serves as a critical marker of a civilization's identity and communication. If a pre-human civilization ever existed, their art could have been one of the few means of transmitting their stories, histories, and myths across time. Sculptures, intricate patterns, or arrangements of objects might have encoded significant cultural meanings or marked historical events. Though we may not decode these specific meanings, the act of creating them indicates a mind focused beyond immediate survival. Even without surviving works, the existence of such art suggests a civilization concerned with more than physiological needs. However, we may not have found their art yet, or we might not recognize it when we do. The Earth is vast, and our exploration of its deepest layers is still in its infancy. If such a civilization existed, it likely used art to reinforce social bonds and inspire cooperation. Unfortunately, without anyone to witness or comprehend it, that identity could vanish, as could the art itself. The absence of surviving works doesn't mean they didn't exist. We infer the presence of ancient languages from tools and structures, and similarly, we could infer non-human art from subtle signs of cultural sophistication. But to understand this, we must first consider how such a society might have risen, flourished, and ultimately faded. The rise and fall of civilizations. A civilization story is one of ceaseless change. It begins with the right conditions for formation, evolves through forces that foster growth, and ultimately ends when those conditions shift beyond its ability to adapt. This pattern is not unique to humanity. If a pre-human civilization existed, it might have followed a similar arc, requiring a stable environment to thrive. It would need consistent access to vital resources like food, raw materials and energy, and a sophisticated system to manage these resources efficiently. Most importantly, cooperation among its members would be essential, driven by deep social bonds or a shared sense of purpose. If this civilization was ocean-based, they might have relied on nutrient-rich currents and predictable migratory patterns of prey. On land, fertile soil, moderate climate and mineral-rich hills might have supported their growth. Once these conditions were in place, the next stage would be specialization. Individuals would take on roles such as toolmakers, hunters, or navigators. Specialization leads to efficiency and innovation, fostering cultural and technological traditions that are passed down through generations. As populations expanded, the need for greater coordination grew, leading to leadership structures and increasingly complex systems. These systems could have been recorded in oral traditions, rituals, or symbolic art, or even in forms we have yet to recognize. As their reach expanded, they may have adapted to new environments, such as inland or coastal regions. Expansion could bring cooperation or conflict, driving innovation. However, Growth brings vulnerability. A drastic change in climate, food sources, or geological events could disrupt the system. For an ocean-based society, a change in water temperature or currents could devastate their resources, while a land-based one might face collapse due to droughts or floods. These challenges are familiar to us from human history. There's also the risk of self-inflicted instability. Overexploitation of resources, environmental degradation, or internal conflict can undermine a society's foundation. Even with advanced technology, mistakes could amplify the consequences. A poorly managed energy source, widespread war, or an environmental catastrophe triggered by industrial activity could lead to collapse. Decline might not always be sudden, it could be gradual, with settlements shrinking, trade diminishing, and knowledge fading. The fall and its causes. The fall of such a civilization might have been caused by factors beyond their control, such as asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, or tectonic movements. These events could have altered the climate, disrupting ecosystems and leading to the civilization's downfall. Even if well managed, the civilization could have been overwhelmed by these cataclysmic forces. As time passed, their physical traces would fade, buildings would crumble, tools corrode, and organic materials would vanish. In millions of years, most of their works would disappear, leaving only fragmentary, ambiguous evidence. Even in their absence, traces of their existence could persist. Subtle changes in ecosystems, genetic legacies in domesticated species, or shifts in minerals and chemicals might remain, offering clues to their former presence. These traces could be faint, but they would exist, waiting to be discovered by those who can perceive them. Some may be buried beneath larger, more cataclysmic events, such as mass extinction events that wiped much of life from the Earth. If a civilization existed before us, it may have met its end in one of these global catastrophes, disappearing from both history and the biosphere. The reflection of time. When we look back at the past, it's easy to think of it as separate from our own time. But in doing so, we also look forward at our own civilization's future through the lens of history. It's as though the ancient Earth is holding up a mirror to our current world. If other species existed before us, they navigated their own beginnings, struggled, innovated, and shaped their environment. They too faced existential challenges, limited resources, environmental shifts, internal conflicts, and rapid technological change. These struggles might resonate with us, even if every detail of their culture was alien. This perspective challenges the notion that our story is entirely unique. Civilizations may not be one-time occurrences, but recurring patterns in the life of a planet. Just as we stand today, they too once believed in their permanence, but time and change are relentless. The realization is humbling. The survival of any civilization depends on more than intelligence or technology. It requires a balance between growth, sustainability, ambition, and foresight. This reflection also raises questions about the future. If we're the first to impact the Earth in significant ways, how will our legacy be perceived by future civilizations, if any? The legacy of our time. Looking at the future, what will be left of us in the geological record? If we vanish, our cities and cultures will likely be reduced to nothing, but chemical and isotopic traces will remain. Future generations or extraterrestrial explorers might discern our legacy through these subtle signals. Our current environmental impact, microplastics, radioactive isotopes, altered carbon ratios, could become the most recognizable sign of our existence, even if everything else is gone. If a pre-human civilization left its mark, it might not have been through monumental structures or grand achievements, but through more lasting, subtle changes to the Earth's fabric. The same could be true for their impact on their environment. They might not have created tangible artifacts we recognize, but their environmental alterations could persist for millions of years. Even if these traces are faint now, they may be buried under larger, more cataclysmic events. The Earth has experienced moments when life nearly vanished, erasing much of what once existed. A final reflection. This idea forces us to confront the possibility that civilizations are not singular, one-time events. They could represent recurring cycles in the planet's history, each rising and falling over vast periods of time. This realization is sobering. It shifts our view of our civilization's place in history. We might not be the first to shape this planet significantly, and perhaps we won't be the last. The history of life on Earth is far longer and more intricate than we imagine, and civilizations, whether human or otherwise, are part of this broader narrative. In reflecting on past and future civilizations, we gain a deeper understanding of our own. The challenges we face, resource depletion, environmental change, technological risks, are not unique to us. They've shaped every civilization that has ever existed. Understanding this can help us appreciate the delicate balance needed for long-term survival. It's not just about intelligence or technology, it's about sustainability, foresight, and humility in the face of time's unyielding march. Looking back at history, we are reminded that time is the ultimate, most brutal editor. Over tens or hundreds of millions of years, Earth's dynamic surface erases most traces of past civilizations. Erosion, subduction, chemical changes, and biological recycling systematically wipe away almost everything. If earlier civilizations existed, their traces are largely gone. Eventually, the same fate will befall us. The question is, when our civilization fades, will the fragments that remain tell a story of survival, adaptation, or collapse? This thought is oddly reassuring, placing us within a long, continuous chain of existence. We are not the pinnacle of evolution, but a unique expression among many. Our achievements are part of a larger ancient pattern, inviting us to consider not just our material impact, but the world we create for future generations. If we could look through the temporal mirror, we might see profound lessons from those before us, or they might learn from us, observing whether we navigate the challenges they couldn't overcome. Cycles of intelligence and civilization. As we consider past civilizations, the idea shifts from an isolated thought experiment to a fundamental question of recurring patterns. If intelligence arose once in human form, why should it be the only time? And if it occurred more than once, is there a repeating cycle to it? Intelligence, however, is not synonymous with civilization. Animals like octopuses, crows, and elephants demonstrate remarkable problem-solving and adaptability, but they don't create cities or global infrastructure. Civilization, on the other hand, is intelligence applied to long-term collective projects, the coordination of large groups, cumulative technology, and manipulation of the environment. This specific combination, intelligence, cooperation, and technology, is rare in the fossil record, but rarity does not mean impossibility. Complex multicellular life has existed for over 500 million years, with numerous bursts of evolutionary innovation. Why wouldn't civilization be part of this ongoing cycle? With time and the right conditions, the unique combination of intelligence, cooperation, and technology might re-emerge. Each time, it would be shaped by its environment, but the outcome, a species capable of reshaping the planet, could repeat. If true, then we, as humans, are not the first or only civilization to have arisen. We might be merely the most recent in a long line of civilizations that rose, flourished, and faded, leaving behind faint traces that grow fainter with time. The life cycle of civilizations. A new form of intelligence emerges, adapting to its environment. It discovers innovative ways to manipulate its surroundings, ensuring its comfort and security. As it grows in number and capability, it develops tools and infrastructure, spreading across the planet and altering it on a global scale. At its peak, the civilization thrives, but eventually it encounters fundamental limits, climatic shifts, resource depletion, internal instability, or external catastrophes. Some civilizations may collapse rapidly, while others fade slowly, with decline taking centuries or millennia. In either case, the result is the same. The civilization disappears and the planet begins to recover. After a long pause, the process begins again with a new species and a new set of tools and cultural paths. The cycles of civilization could be separated by tens of millions of years, long enough for continents to shift, climates to change, and traces to vanish. Even if some artifacts survive, they might be buried so deeply or altered by geological forces that they are indistinguishable from natural features. Not every cycle would produce a civilization as we define it. Some intelligent species might consciously choose paths that minimize their environmental impact, valuing stability and harmony over rapid growth. They might never develop complex metallurgy or industrial power, yet still experience their own cycles of rise and fall. If cycles of intelligence exist, they raise the question, What fundamental forces drive them? Is it an inherent aspect of evolution, or just a rare convergence of events? And if it is a pattern, does it follow a rhythm tied to planetary cycles such as climate shifts, tectonic events, or mass extinctions? The evidence of past civilizations. Moments of mass extinction have been pivotal in Earth's history. After each event, life rebounds with diverse innovation. If intelligence is one of those possible outcomes, extinction events could, paradoxically, provide fertile ground for its emergence. The idea of recurring civilizations fits within these cycles of life's evolution. A new species emerges, adapts, thrives, and eventually collapses, leaving behind subtle traces in the geological record. These traces might be faint, but they could still exist in the form of altered ecosystems, genetic legacies in domesticated species, or shifts in minerals and chemicals. While physical traces may vanish, chemical and isotopic markers might remain, providing clues about a civilization that once thrived. For civilizations that existed tens or hundreds of millions of years ago, detecting these traces would be challenging. They could be deeply buried or altered by natural processes, but the faintest remnants might still exist waiting for discovery. The fragility of legacy. The difficulty in detecting ancient civilizations is compounded by the vast timescales between cycles. Between one civilization and the next, tens of millions of years could elapse, allowing natural processes to erase almost all traces. Some civilizations might not even produce the technological infrastructure we recognize. Instead, they may have lived in ways that left little impact on the planet's physical structures, yet still experienced rise and fall. If cycles of intelligence do indeed exist, it's possible that the aftermath of each extinction could make the emergence of new intelligent life more likely. Each cycle, however, might not follow a linear path of progress. Civilizations might not always be more advanced than their predecessors. They could represent different strengths, cultural priorities, and forms of technology. The cycle might resemble an endlessly turning wheel, where intelligence arises and fades in various forms, with each civilization having its own unique mark on the world. The end of civilization and our place in time. What would happen if our species were to cease to exist overnight? In the first hours, signs of our absence would be subtle. Over time, systems we depend on would fail. Power grids, water treatment plants, and food supply chains would all break down. In the following months, nature would begin to reclaim our cities. Plants would grow through asphalt, and wildlife would return in unexpected numbers. Over decades, buildings would decay, roads would fragment, and forests would reclaim urban landscapes. The most enduring legacy of our civilization may not be the monuments we've built, but the environmental impact we've left behind. Plastics, radioactive isotopes, and altered carbon ratios would form a distinct recognizable boundary in the geological record. These traces might persist for millions of years, outlasting even the most durable physical structures. Our legacy may be a thin layer in the rock record, but it will remain just as any previous civilization's impact would. The Earth will continue its cycles, and even though our civilization may one day vanish, it will be remembered in subtle ways. Whether it's through chemical markers, fossilized remains, or changes in ecosystems, our existence will be recorded in the deep layers of Earth's history, waiting to be discovered by future intelligences. Part 5. Our Own Place in Time, the Echo of Past Civilizations. What is truly striking in this profound thought experiment is how astonishingly quickly the vast majority of our physical presence would be erased. For all our monumental concrete and steel, for all our sprawling cities and meticulously engineered landscapes, nature would reclaim the surface of the Earth far faster than we comfortably like to imagine. It would be the hidden, microscopic and subtle chemical changes that truly endured, and that in turn powerfully demonstrates how plausible it is that if there were civilizations before us, their surface traces could have been utterly wiped away just as completely. Contemplating our potential absence also compels us to confront a fundamental question about what kind of enduring mark we choose to leave. Right now, in this very moment, we are actively shaping our future legacy, whether we consciously intend to or not. The specific materials we utilize, the energy sources we predominantly depend on, the precise ways we interact with and modify ecosystems. These pivotal decisions will ultimately determine what remains visibly present for anyone who meticulously studies the Earth long after we're gone. If the most durable and undeniable evidence of our existence turns out to be widespread environmental damage, then our entire story might be interpreted very differently than we would prefer to narrate it ourselves. And there's another compelling angle to consider. The absence of humanity would not by any means signify the absence of intelligence forever. Earth's vibrant history strongly suggests that life, with its inherent resilience, consistently rebounds from mass extinction events, often diversifying into entirely new and unexpected forms. In our potential absence, the ecological niches we currently occupy would become open to other species, some of which might, over immense spans of time, evolve higher forms of intelligence. The cycle could conceivably begin again, just as we have been wondering it might have before our time. If so, those future minds might one day look back, if they possessed the capacity, at the faint enigmatic marks we left and quietly wonder who we were, just as we now wonder about those who might have come before us. There's something profoundly reassuring, a quiet solace, in understanding that not every single question inherently demands a definitive answer. We are conventionally taught to perceive unanswered questions as unresolved problems, as frustrating gaps in our understanding that must be diligently filled. And in many instances, that perspective is entirely valid. We meticulously build science and history on the fervent desire to close those very gaps. But when it comes to the deep, unfathomable past, especially those parts of it that might involve other civilizations long since vanished, there's a certain, almost meditative peace in allowing some profound questions to gracefully remain open. It's not merely about the romantic allure of the unknown, though that certainly plays a part. It's about consciously recognizing that mystery itself has a crucial role in shaping the very way we perceive our place in the vast, interconnected world. If we possessed the capacity to meticulously map every single corner of history, if we could account for every rise and every fall, the past might ironically feel like a closed book. There would be nothing left to discover, nothing left to imagine. And imagination, as much as empirical data, is precisely what fuels our incessant curiosity. We already inhabit a world teeming with mysteries, often hiding in plain sight. There are ancient ruins whose original builders we know, but whose fundamental reasons for existence remain passionately debated. There are languages we have painstakingly recovered in fragments, but whose full, nuanced meaning entirely escapes us. There are fossil species that stand precariously at the very edge of what we currently understand about evolution. These compelling puzzles anchor us in the humbling knowledge that the human story in itself is inherently complex and profoundly incomplete. Now extend that profound feeling beyond the human narrative to an epoch when, if our idea holds true, we were not here at all, yet someone else might have been. That tantalizing possibility invites a deep sense of humility. We are accustomed to perceiving ourselves as the first and only ones to achieve this level of cognitive complexity. To imagine that others might have accomplished it long before us doesn't, in any way, diminish what we've collectively achieved. It simply situates it within a broader, more expansive frame. We cease to be the sole authors of civilization on Earth, and become, instead, an integral part of a much longer, more ancient tradition, even if we only suspect its existence. That grand tradition is built upon the persistent rise of intelligence wherever environmental conditions permit, on the ceaseless experiments nature runs in shaping minds that can plan, create, and reshape their surroundings. And because we do not definitively know if such predecessors genuinely existed, they remain free to manifest as countless things in our imagination. They could have been deep ocean dwellers, with sprawling, intricate coral-like cities, or subtle forest creatures who worked in harmony with living trees to shape their homes. They could have been small and incredibly quick, relying on intricate networks of communication rather than towering monumental structures. They could have looked nothing like us at all. In their profound mystery, they possess the freedom to be as strange and diverse as our imagination permits, precisely because we're not constrained by definitive evidence, only by what is plausible within the broad boundaries of nature. This inherent flexibility renders the idea remarkably useful too. It can serve as a potent mental exercise, a profound way of rigorously testing our entrenched assumptions about civilization. What truly is essential for one to form and flourish? How much of what we instinctively believe is necessary is in fact merely a reflection of our own specific biology and culture? If another civilization could, conceivably, exist without fire, without wheels, without metallurgy, then perhaps our current definitions are simply too narrow, too anthropocentric, and if they could create enduring beauty, foster profound stability, or accumulate vast knowledge without the kinds of widespread environmental damage we often produce, then perhaps there's something in that imagined example that could, subtly, guide us. The comfort also arises from understanding that some mysteries possess the remarkable ability to survive the passage of immense time, completely intact. In our world, there are events and intricate patterns that steadfastly resist explanation, not because we haven't diligently tried, but because the crucial evidence is irrevocably gone. That is the fundamental nature of deep time. Rock layers are systematically erased, organic matter is ceaselessly recycled, tectonic plates carry entire continents under the crust. Over millions of years, the physical record becomes inherently selective, preserving only a minuscule fraction of what once existed. If there was a civilization before us, the odds are heavily stacked against us ever finding definitive proof. But that also profoundly means their story remains entirely theirs, untouched by our interpretations. There's a certain generosity in that. If you truly ponder it, not every path needs to be rewritten or re-examined by those who come after. Some can remain whole within their own pristine moment, unobserved but utterly complete. When we imagine them, we are not so much reconstructing a concrete truth as we are building a conceptual bridge between our present and a profound absence we cannot fill. That very act of imagining is its own intrinsic reward. It sharpens our awareness of what it truly means to exist, to leave traces and ultimately to be forgotten, and yet mystery does not equate to isolation. Even without tangible evidence, the powerful idea of a past intelligence connects us to something far larger than ourselves. It gently reminds us that we share this planet with a vast, ancient history of life, the majority of which is gone, but all of which fundamentally contributed to the specific conditions we now inhabit. We are, in essence, the inheritors, not merely of genetic material, but of vast landscapes sculpted by billions of years of intricate interaction between life and the dynamic planet. In that profound sense, even a vanished civilization we can never definitively prove might still be an integral part of our lineage, if only in the subtle way their existence or their absence shaped the overarching path of evolution. Holding on to a mystery also consciously allows ample room for profound wonder, in a way that definitive, hard answers sometimes cannot. It keeps us in the precious habit of continuously asking what if, and why not. It actively encourages exploration without the rigid expectation that every journey must culminate in a grand discovery. That is an immensely important mindset, because the universe will never run out of compelling questions, and we will not always possess the tools or the time to comprehensively answer them all. Accepting that profound truth can render the unknown less frustrating and more akin to a constant companion, something that graciously travels alongside us, continually shaping the way we think and perceive the world. In practical terms, mystery can even be protective. It prevents us from prematurely assuming we have reached the absolute limits of what is possible. If we firmly believed that we were the very first and only intelligent species, we might also mistakenly believe that the end of our civilization would signify the definitive end of intelligence on Earth forever. But if we allow for the profound possibility that others came before, and that others could conceivably come again, then our perspective fundamentally shifts. We become less the sole, fragile stewards of a rare spark and more one link in a vast ancient chain that may stretch across countless eons. That doesn't imply our survival doesn't matter. On the contrary, it means our story fits into a much bigger, more intricate one. And perhaps that is the true quiet comfort. We can do our absolute best knowing that we're not starting from utter nothingness, and that we are certainly not the final word in the planet's immense, unfolding history. Whether or not anyone ever definitively proves a pre-human civilization existed, the mere possibility itself is sufficient to keep us looking deeper into the past and thinking harder and more responsibly about the future. It transforms the absence of definitive evidence into a kind of shared, expansive space between imagination and reality. A space where rigorous science and boundless curiosity meet, without rushing to prematurely close the gap. The mystery in this profound sense isn't just about them. It's fundamentally about us. It's about how we choose to live, knowing that we'll one day be part of someone else's unanswered questions. It's easy, amidst the immense sweep of deep time, to become entirely lost, to expend so much creative energy imagining what might have been or what might come next, that the present moment becomes almost an afterthought. But if you gently pull back from those vast stretching timelines and return to the specific, immediate moment we're actually inhabiting, you discover something profoundly worth holding on to. This is the one singular point in history we can experience directly. The only era where we don't have to guess, where we're not entirely relying on fragmented clues and subjective interpretations. It is the one part of the grand story we get to genuinely live from the inside. Right now, in this very instant, we are the inheritors of every intricate twist and turn in the planet's history so far. We are standing on ground meticulously shaped by billions of years of dynamic geology, beneath a sky with an atmosphere precisely adjusted by countless generations of life that preceded us. The specific arrangement of continents, the intricate chemistry of the oceans, the delicate balance of gases in the air, none of it is accidental or random. It is the cumulative product of absolutely everything that came before, including the devastating extinctions, the vibrant recoveries, and the long, quiet stretches of evolutionary continuity in between. This present moment is not a blank slate waiting to be written upon. It is dense with the immense momentum from the past and brimming with transformative potential for the future. In it we possess the collective knowledge and sophisticated tools to understand far more about the world than any species before us ever could. We can meticulously look back into the deep past with powerful satellites, microscopic precision, and advanced chemical analysis techniques. We can model possible futures with intricate equations and complex computer simulations. We can observe ourselves from orbit and unequivocally recognize the immense changes we've wrought upon the planet's surface in just a few short centuries. That level of comprehensive awareness is exceedingly rare in Earth's history, and may well be rare in the history of any planet throughout the cosmos. Part 6. Reflection on the present. What legacy shall we leave? Being here now also means possessing profound choices. Our collective impact on the Earth is undeniably immense and accelerating. That is a stark reality we simply cannot escape. But the way we wield that immense influence is not predetermined. We can choose to amplify the damage we inflict, or we can consciously choose to diligently limit it. We can decide whether our enduring legacy will be a sharp, indelible break in the geological record or a more subtle, harmonious presence that leaves ample room for what comes after. The past might be irrevocably fixed, but the future is still open, responsive to the pivotal decisions we make right here, right now. It's worth remembering that those decisions don't have to be grand, dramatic gestures to truly matter. History is fundamentally shaped by accumulation, the slow, persistent build-up of habits, complex systems, and innovative ideas. A civilization is not merely its towering monuments or its charismatic leaders. It is the profound sum of countless individual actions, meticulously repeated day after day. Those actions are unfolding right now, in everything from how we utilize vital resources to how we transmit invaluable knowledge across generations. In that profound sense, the present is the active, living layer where the past and future dynamically meet, and what we choose to do within it ultimately decides which patterns will persist and which will transform. If you perceive our time as an integral part of a larger recurring cycle, then this very moment represents a critical phase. We are far enough along in our development to have demonstrably altered the planet in visible, measurable ways. That places us at a unique juncture where the very same pressures that may have challenged any earlier civilization, environmental limits, escalating energy demands,
they had
internal
such
societal
primitive
complexity,
technology,
are now
yet
steadily
look at
building
what they
around us.
accomplished.
We possess the unparalleled ability to study our own trajectory in real time, discerning the warning signs and the burgeoning opportunities. If if there is in fact a viable way to extend the lifespan of a technological civilization beyond whatever natural limit the cycle imposes, this is precisely when we would need to discover it. And if we are indeed the very first civilization, not part of any prior cycle, then our choices matter even more profoundly. We might be inadvertently setting the precedent for what an intelligent species can ultimately achieve with a planet. That is an enormous responsibility, whether we consciously asked for it or not. In that version of history, the patterns we establish now could echo into whatever comes next, millions of years from now. If intelligence rises again, we could be the inspiring example that future minds lovingly remember, or the cautionary tale they meticulously study. Part 7. The Unseen Legacy of Intelligence. Right now is also the only point where the questions about the past and future seamlessly intersect. When we speculate about earlier civilizations, we are, in essence, testing the fundamental boundaries of what is possible within the universe. Could intelligence evolve more than once?
We live in a world where connections are made
without
instantly.
leaving obvious, tangible traces? Those profound questions are about them, but they are also fundamentally about us. They ask whether we are merely part of something larger and cyclical, or entirely unique and on our own, whether our profound challenges are singular or universally shared. And by actively living in the present, we possess the distinct advantage of being able to act on those questions, even without definitive answers. The present is where we can meticulously build records specifically meant to last. Not because we naively expect them to endure forever, but because we inherently understand how fragile evidence can be. It's where we can consciously decide what knowledge is truly worth preserving and how best to meticulously preserve it. If the geological record is the only truly reliable way to communicate across millions of years, we can consciously shape that message intentionally, rather than leaving it as an accidental byproduct of our immense industrial footprint. That is a rare kind of agency in the life of a species, and one that is all too easy to overlook when we are solely focused on the immediate. Where we are right now is also a moment of incredible, unprecedented connection. We can communicate across the entire planet in mere seconds, share complex ideas instantly, and coordinate vast efforts at a scale no earlier society could have possibly imagined. That intricate network, while fragile and dependent on infrastructure that would vanish without maintenance, is, while it exists, a powerful tool for shaping our collective story. It means that the decisions we make today are not isolated. They ripple outward faster and farther than at any other time in history. And yet, despite all this profound reach and accumulated knowledge, the present is still inherently full of limits.
Now, let's learn about the history of our world.
We cannot foresee every single consequence of our actions. We cannot predict every dramatic shift in climate, every nuanced political change, every innovation or every setback. We live in a complex blend of control and profound uncertainty, just like every civilization before us. The crucial difference is that we are acutely aware of it, observing ourselves from within and from a conceptual distance simultaneously. That perspective is a strength if we use it wisely, and a potentially dangerous distraction if we become lost within it. Living here, in this exact moment, means holding two profound truths at once: that we are temporary and that we possess immense influence. Temporary because no species lasts forever, and influential because while we are here, we possess the capacity to profoundly alter the course of things. It's a combination that can lead to either carelessness or to carefulness, depending on how we choose to perceive it. The deep past gently suggests that if we don't diligently pay attention to that delicate balance, the planet will eventually and patiently reset without us. But it also suggests that life, in its very essence, is resilient, that recovery and renewal are intrinsic parts of its fundamental nature. Where we are right now is a crossroads we can only truly recognize in hindsight. Future generations, whether human or something else entirely, will discern the precise shape of our choices far more clearly than we can. They'll know whether we skillfully extended our time in the cycle or tragically cut it short. They'll know whether we left behind a legacy of invaluable learning or of profound loss. For us, it's harder to see, because we are still deeply embedded in the middle of the story. But that's the very nature of the present. It's always in motion, always ceaselessly becoming the past. And that's precisely why, even while we imagine what might have come before and what could come after, it's profoundly worth pausing to simply notice where we stand now. The moment itself is fleeting, but it's also where every single decision is made, every action taken, every small shift in the course of history set into motion. It's the pivotal point of connection between the Earth's long, deep memory and the boundless possibilities still ahead. Thank you for letting your thoughts wander here with me tonight. If this journey left you curious, or simply provided something steady and calm to drift off to, I would be genuinely glad if you stayed for the next one. There's always more to explore, more quiet questions to gently ask, and more profound ways to perceive the world differently. Until then, rest well, and let the story continue.
What will you choose
beautifully
to leave behind?
In your own dreams